Every year, as temperatures drop, the air turns poisonous. Lahore, Faisalabad, and Gujranwala disappear under a thick blanket of smog. So toxic that Lahore has once again ranked among the most polluted cities in the world. Sometimes second, sometimes third. Hospitals overflow with patients. Schools close down, and breathing itself becomes dangerous. But the question is, how bad is it really, and why does it keep getting worse? I'm Mahin Azam Khan, and you're watching Front Seat to Climate Change. Don't forget, the full version of this video is available on DawnNews English. To understand what's happening in our air and what needs to change, we spoke to Tauqeer Sheikh, climate and development policy expert. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Saab. Thank you so much for joining us. So when we talk about air pollution, Pakistan often makes the headlines. And in fact, since the past few days, Lahore has been ranking as the second or the third polluted city in the world again. How bad is the situation really, and how does it compare to our neighbors in the region?
Thank you, Mahin. It's always good to meet you and speak to you and to your audience. And it's an important issue. I want to give you a small analogy. Air quality or air pollution is like a coin. On one side, there's a cost to it. The other side is an opportunity. Bigger the cost, bigger a challenge for our creativity and to seize opportunities. So I don't see a picture of doom and gloom in the present worst situation. The present situation is that we are becoming victims of some myths. For example, we think that this is a fifth season. And in other words, for remaining 4 seasons, there is no air pollution. No, it's a year-round problem. That's one myth. Another myth that we sometimes have is that it's all come from poor farmers' activities like burning crops or crop residue or killing or coming from India. These are small percentages of air pollution and they're not the hardcore issues. And third is that we think that it's only an urban issue. We need to remember that these are myths. They need to be demolished. They are not accurate. And they misinform our readers and audience, and as well as policymakers. So we have to look at it as a 24/7 issue for 12 months, covering urban and rural areas and covering sectors beyond residue burning or killings or regional dimension to it, and look at it as a fundamentally development issue. Now, of course, your direct answer and the short answer is that it's a very big health issue. It's a very big health issue, particularly for the poor, because they live in congested areas and they use cheaper fuels and vehicles like two-wheelers and three-wheelers. And it's particularly bad for women, and more so if they're expecting and they're infant babies. So let's not think that it's only a problem of Gulberg and defense. It gets worse as you go towards inner cities. As your income level goes down, it becomes worse for you. As your gender changes to women, and your age group comes smaller and smaller as an infant and even a baby in the womb. So it's an issue for a next generation. It's an issue of not only health, but also of justice. But at the same time, the flip side of the coin, it's a challenge for our innovation, acknowledge what's happening in the world, see what the best practices are, and how best Pakistan can turn around more quickly than we have done so far.
Despite court orders, emergency plans, and temporary shutdowns, the haze returns every winter, worse than before. The reason is simple. We treat air pollution as an annual nuisance, not a national emergency. So where do solutions lie? We've seen talk about electric buses, cleaner fuels, and industrial regulation. But how realistic are these plans for a country facing an economic crunch?
This is a very good question. See, once you know what the problem is, once we can fully understand or grasp the dimension of the problem, that's half of the solution. The moment I say that urban transportation is a major issue, it is responsible for about 40% of our pollutions, air pollutants in the air. Then we know how to solve it. solving is all those things that I mentioned. Let me repeat those. If I say that we don't have the vehicle retirement policy, government can very easily have a policy and enforce it rigorously. Some countries have done it more creatively. That is not an administrative approach of fining people all the time, but also negotiating with the car manufacturers and motorbike manufacturers to have a trade-in policy with them. You give an older one, and we give you cheaper finance, not as 100% subsidy, but cheaper finance to buy a new one. So you trade in is the retirement. Then you improve the quality of your vehicles, and that's also very important. That would mean the fitness certificate of the cars has to be improved, has to be systematically done. And we need to learn that all our efforts for the government to do it have failed because it's a private sector function. Government need to contract companies to maintain the fitness standards. That's the second part. Then it brings me to the third part, is that can we have a more educated vehicle import policy, which means that we say that we'll import fuel as well as vehicle which are high grade, Euro 3, 4, or 5. That's one. Then we look at how other countries have done it. I want to give you some example. For example, EVs now or e-rickshaws now and e-bikes are now have a business case. In terms of price, they have become very competitive. The government has to extend its support in terms of taxation, subsidies, loans from commercial banks, and so on and so forth to speed up the process. And the process can have a target of 100% transformation of import sector in 5 years' time, and bigger ambition to phase out all the older versions. And then for this, you can also see how some other countries have the example. I recently wrote in my article for Dawn at the Let Us Breathe conference in Lahore, is that in Bangkok, for example, and Bangkok is only one example, they did public transportation as a part of a carbon trading project, whereby they got international climate finance to bring in electric vehicles, charging stations, and transformation of the public transportation so that people have to rely less and less on their individual transportation and on collective mass transit system. So there are opportunities available to us and options available to us. They are relatively easy. They're not very expensive. All they need is a government's commitment to come out of an approach that bureaucracy always offers is the administrative approach, fines and things of this like. Let's have a more creative response on the flip side of the coin.
Pakistan's courts have been vocal on environmental issues, from banning stubble burning to ordering air quality action plans. But activism in the courtroom doesn't always translate to action on the ground. Absolutely, and climate change is an issue that needs no borders, no visas. It enters any place that it wills, and we all need regional cooperation to solve this issue. So Pakistan's courts have also been very active on environmental issues, but has that activism led to real change? And when decisions are made, do they actually get implemented, or do they still, tend to just stay the way they are?
I'm sorry, I missed your first part of your question.
So Pakistan's courts have been very active on environmental issues, but has that activism led to real change? And when decisions are made, do they actually get implemented, or do they just stay the same?
This is a very important question and it needs to be understood. Pakistani judiciary has given landmark judgments to establish climate change as a fundamental human right. And that's a very positive and a fundamental contribution of Pakistani judiciary. But judiciary can only go that far and help us think differently about the climate change issues. And they have filled a void that existed in our constitution that does not use the word climate change or air pollution. So the progressive interpretation by the superior courts have filled that void. But the problem is when the state does not act, and if others come forward to fill the void, it results in misrule. Example, if state as a regulator does not fulfill its obligations, the private sectors and the residents will throw their garbage in water bodies. They'll overpump water, groundwater, I mean. They will use unfit vehicles that result in pollution. And that is filling a void by private sector. Then the environmental cost becomes very heavy. Now, likewise, if we do not teach the ethical values to our people that we are responsible citizens and we are custodians of this earth appointed by God, and this is only an amanat to us for next generation, these are very important religious precepts. If we don't bring them as mainstream issues, extremist groups, fundamentalist groups, and terrorist groups will fill that void. And then they will mislead the younger generation into violent and extremist positions. It's filling the void. So in every society, there are voids. When the state fails as a regulator or in dispensing justice or in allocating fair and equitable social justice or climate justice, and resources don't go towards the poor and the marginalized, then that void is filled by actors which are not supposed to that fill that. So coming back, it is right now in our country, it's filled by extremist groups, or it's filled by irresponsible citizens, including private sector citizens, who spoil and degrade our ecosystem. And it is also filled by our judiciary. Judiciary is a north star of our society. Their function is only to give us sense of direction, to interpret the constitution and give us the principles how to manage things. And they have done more than fair share in terms of leading the country. They cannot go to every police station and talk to inspector that whether or not you have implemented the decision. They cannot go to the planning board of Punjab government or irrigation department of Punjab government or EPA of Punjab government to ask them where is the EIA or what is the quality of your EIA or where is the integrity of data sets. These are not courts functions, but we are forcing them to do that. So that would mean that somebody else we are inviting to fill the void, and every time if the void is filled by those players who are not supposed to do that, it will become a bigger mess. Sorry, it's a complicated answer, but I want your audience, I hope you can shorten it by a little bit by editing, but I want your audience to know, please don't invite, just the way we don't want to invite military in politics or in democracy, we don't want to invite judiciary in administration of the government or climate decisions. Just the way we don't want terrorists and extremists to become the norm of our society, exactly the same way, we don't want the government to fail in its responsibility of becoming a good regulator that makes good, sensible investments to ensure our health and future, but also gives an equity and justice to our people.
And while policies may exist, their impact isn't felt equally. Those who contribute the least to emissions, rickshaw drivers, factory workers, school children, often breathe the dirtiest air. The right to clean air isn't just about technology, it's about justice. And that means both domestic reforms and international support must work together. Building on what you said, I agree with you that we often take it more seriously when we can see it, that is during the months of October, November, December, because we can see how polluted the sky is. But it's an ongoing issue. It's something that is prevalent throughout the year, and it is indeed a health crisis. When we talk about smog and poor air quality, which sector or activities are contributing the most?
In my humble view, the biggest contributor is the transportation sector. And it has 2 or 3 key components to it. Number one, we burn fossil fuel. Number two, we burn fossil fuel of low grade because from the international market, we don't buy the premium one. And then connected with this issue is that our fleet is not modern, following Euro 4 or 5 standards. And then we do not have our a policy on the retirement of old vehicles. And then, of course, we have additional problems such as in absence of public transportation, then everybody needs to worry about their own transportation needs. And therefore, the rate of growth of vehicles, both two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and the commercial transportation, as well as car, is very rapid. It's higher than the population growth rate. More so in Punjab, where population is already very dense, but also across the country. So it's a complex issue. There'll not be a linear answer, and there'll not be a linear solution. When I say it's a coin, when you flip the coin, you look at what's written, what's the inscription, and then try to do a little bit on each one of those items.
I absolutely agree with you that we do use the carrot and stick policy, but we focus on the stick side more and we focus on the carrot side less. So I think it's time that we start, focusing on incentivization. We've also seen that, the international world and global countries have used carbon markets in reducing air pollution. So how can carbon markets play a meaningful role in reducing air pollution in Pakistan, perhaps?
See, if our 40% of air pollutions are coming from transportation, then the government need to have a rapid public transportation system design, do some costing. And when you do the costing, it's not only how many million or billion dollars it will cost, but also do the costing of emissions that you will save. Then there are companies and opportunities available with whom you negotiate. This is the level of my climate emissions or carbon emissions that will happen. If I invest on public transportation, I'll not only reduce my 40%, but I'll also contribute towards public health and health of children and asthma and all that. And therefore, you develop a business case for this. So the projects in Pakistan, like PC1 and others, tend to look at only the economic cost of it. What I'm trying to say is that all our projects need to have a climate risk assessment as well as the carbon cost of it. That is true for agriculture projects as much as it's true for urban transportation. So yes, carbon trading is an opportunity available, and that would essentially mean that we revisit our planning documents to build sections of carbon emissions in each project and then train the officers to fill that information scientifically so that it could be verified by third party. Once we do that internal housekeeping or internal reform step in a year or 2 years' time, we can have a number of projects that can be fit for international competition, and then we can go to GCF or private sector investors or Greenland Bank or Swiss government or somebody else to become partner in public transportation, as they are doing in many other parts of the world.
Every year, global institutions, the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and Green Climate Fund announce billions in climate financing for developing countries. But when it comes to air pollution, how much of that funding actually clears the air we breathe? To help us understand where the money goes, we spoke to Ammar Khan, an economist and also the host of All Things Money on DawnNews English.
So that totally depends on what we want to finance at this point. Air pollution is something more complex. It's like you cannot do any kind of micro intervention, then expect air pollution to suddenly just go away. So a lot more needs to be done at the systemic level, whether that is in terms of, let's say, regulations, in terms of laws, in terms of insurance, there are emission standards in place, so on and so forth. So you can get all sorts of financing, but until and unless you ensure that laws are followed, not much can be done in terms of controlling the overall quality of air.
Most funds are directed towards energy transition, flood resilience, or infrastructure, while urban smog remains underfunded. It's often seen as a local problem rather than a climate one.
I don't think anyone considers air pollution or smog is a local issue rather than climate. It definitely is a climate related issue because it essentially exists because of any kind of climate change, so on and so forth. And Green Climate Fund has a focus on it as well. But as I said earlier, there's just so much that private intervention can do in this thing, or private financing can do. A lot more is largely dependent on what kind of standards we put into place, what kind of laws are in place, so on and so forth. So, for example, if someone continues to import or someone continues to use bad quality fuel, that's essentially failure of regulation rather than, let's say, market failure, because obviously someone will continue to buy lower quality fuel if it's available. So you've got to have base level standards in place to ensure that you don't sell or you don't, trade bad quality products there.
And even when climate projects are launched, how much of that money actually trickles down to improve air quality in cities like Lahore or Karachi?
So, not to a lot of extent. As I said earlier, you can finance, let's say, one part of the life. For example, you're financing some kind of public transportation module where you can have buses or metro or trains or whatever. But that's about it. Everything else is still the city. So we've got X number of cars out there with which do not meet base level safety criteria or base level emission criteria, and they continue to be on the card regardless of how, no matter how much money you throw at the problem, no matter how much financing you have, the problem will continue to exist. So against more of a regulation slash law thing than anything else.
The concern now is not just about access to funds, it's about accountability and impact. Green loans sound promising, but they come at a cost. They add to Pakistan's already heavy debt burden. So how do we strike a balance between the urgent need for climate financing and the risk of dependency?
So I think that's the thing here. We don't really have any ready or readily executable projects that may lead to more green loans at this point, kind of a catch-22 situation where we cannot offer any serious green projects that have very high, that can be listed very high in merit in the case of adaptation or mitigation. And because we don't have such projects, we don't have a lot of green debt either. A lot more needs to be done, but then again, a lot more can be done without really relying on financing either. It's more about how we do and what we do with the scarce resources we have available. So it's more of a policy and action related issue rather than lack of financing. No one's really stopping anyone to, let's say, not do a certain thing, not do a certain good thing because there is no financing available. A lot can be done without financing as well. Just having base level standards in place can change a lot more than any quantum of dollars can.
Even when the money comes in, Pakistan often struggles with implementation, weak institutions, poor monitoring, and lack of reliable data.
No, Pakistan does not have the institutional capacity. We have developed some capacity over the years, but if you really talking specifically about air pollution, I don't think any such capacity exists, because if it existed, we wouldn't have bad air quality day in, day out throughout the year and be among the top 10 cities that have that. And there must have been someone would monitor it and ensure that these things continue to go down. They would have targets in place, so on and so forth, but no such institutional capacity exists.
The new focus on loss and damage financing after COP27 could change that if Pakistan can link its air pollution crisis to climate vulnerability in measurable ways.
It can, yes, it can. Pakistan, there's a lot more that can be done in terms of pitching air pollution as one of the key areas, but that requires institutional capacity, coming back to our original point.
If Pakistan wants to be taken seriously, it must back its demands with data and strong proposals.
So I think, as I said earlier, we really need to focus on institutionalization. We really need to focus on having the right targets in place. For example, if you're in Karachi or Lahore or Pindi or Multan or anywhere basically, and what is the base level of air quality that you want to work with? Let's say it's like 50 or 40 on the AQI index, so on and so forth. And how do you get there? What is the strategy to get there? Do you need less transportation on the road? Do you need less bikes on the road? Do you need less cars on the road? Okay, if there are less cars on the road, how do people move around? Do you need more public transport? Do you need something else? Do you need better quality fuel? Again, this needs to be a strategy in place that can take you from a certain level of air quality to a much better level. China has successfully demonstrated the same when over the last, I would say, 15 years, when smog was a major issue in Beijing and just massively cracked down on it, and now it's one of the cleanest airs in the world. So there are ways to do this, but that means developing that institutional capacity at a local level, at a provincial level, mostly at a local level, mostly at a city level, to really understand, because every city operates differently, to understand how things are. Once we have that strategy in place, once we have that city level city level air quality or air targeting in place, then you can see what specific programs work for you. And then you can really focus on financing. We can't just say, okay, you know what, if once we get financing, then we can start doing basic stuff. We need to start doing the basic stuff. We need to start doing stuff which does not cost a lot. I mean, having the right framework in place, having the right laws in place, enforcing those laws doesn't cost a lot. But if we do not enforce those, and if we just continue expecting some kind of a handout from here, there, anyway, that just doesn't really solve the problem. That's further compounds the problem, because now you haven't really solved the air quality problem. You don't really have any kind of targets in place, but now you have more debt in place, and you don't know what to do if you just throw money at the problem, expecting it to magically solve all your problems.
Clean air is not a luxury, it's a right. But will it take more than emergency shutdowns and seasonal outrage to claim it? It requires long-term planning, investment and enforcement, from Lahore to Islamabad and from the World Bank to every neighborhood in Pakistan. You're watching Front Seat to Climate Change on DawnNews TV. Catch the full conversations with Tauqeer, Sheikh and Ammar Khan on DawnNews English. I'm Mahin Azam Khan signing off. Until next week, let's fight for air that keeps us alive, not sick.